Hi folks, it's me again with another attempt at the Pooley's Dawn to Dusk challenge. This time I thought I'd try to link it to one of the year's outstanding events, the 80th anniversary of D-Day. I've always been in awe of one particular incident on that day, and that's the capture of a bridge over the Orne Canal by glider-borne troops. This was an outstanding demonstration of flying skills and precision navigation. It was done at night and without the benefit of an engine to sort out any mistakes. This was given the name Operation Dead Stick. After the action, a group of Soviet observers were shown around and refused to believe that it was possible to achieve this, and accused the British of staging the whole thing. I considered the possibility of replicating this event using the SD-1 Minisport as my transport. The Minisport has the range and endurance to complete the trip without a refuelling stop if leaving the UK from the South Coast airfield. The original departure airfield for the gliders was Tarrant Rushton, but they really didn't fancy the long sea crossing to Normandy. I pick up the glider's inbound track and then return to the UK without landing in France. Making an actual touchdown at the bridge wasn't going to be possible, but I could at least film the approach, which is something I don't think has ever been done before. So here's the rough outline of the plan. This would take about 5.5 to 6 hours, and if the winds weren't favourable, I'd have plenty of diversion options along the French coast. All the best plans need rehearsing. This began in January this year after a long spell of bad weather. We had a rare dry period, and I took the opportunity on a very cold day with the usual array of cameras to set off for a flight intended to confirm the glide range of the Minisport with half a tank of fuel, like I'd have on the day. Now, I did say this was a rehearsal, but not a dress rehearsal, just a tryout of various functions. I had no intention of actually landing, but this became my own version of Operation Dead Stick, flying a glider to a ridiculously small field and, well, watch this.
Oh bugger.
This wasn't the intention. The carburettor iced up, the engine then packed up and refused 2 attempts at a restart. The result was similar to D-Day, but without the need to jump out and shoot anybody, although I felt like giving the engine a good kicking. Now I need a new plan. No more Operation Dead Stick. Bring on Operation Yardstick. Now, followers of my YouTube channel will know that I love to carry cameras into the air, and I've used these to take photos of interesting and quirky places and things that are scattered across the Highlands, castles aplenty, curiosities abounding, conundrums countless, points of interest, or POIs for short. Perhaps I could incorporate this knowledge into a navigation competition. Well, for sure I could, but most if not all of these competitions, Top Nav is a well-known example, required traditional nav skills. What I had in mind was a test of skills, but allowing the use of modern nav software and whatever the internet could provide to the pilot to achieve the same task, which would be to identify a feature, a building or a landmark from the air by the use of GPS-driven software. This would still provide a challenge to navigation skills, but the emphasis would shift from MDR to number crunching and measuring, hence the title, Yardstick. The tiebreaker would be the accuracy achieved by trying to hit a timing target at the end of the route. This was the challenge for me then, how to construct a worthwhile test of abilities for which Google Earth, SkyDemon or any other digital aid couldn't be used to achieve the result without some clever use of both of those aids to gain an advantage. There would have to be enough flexibility in the plan to allow aircraft of basic and higher performance to take part on equal terms, solo or dual, and under safe conditions given the mountains to the south. My library of photographs could provide features to be identified, ideally from camera angles that would make interpretation by using satellite imagery difficult, because that looks straight down. Careful timing constraints could remove the ability for extensive pre-flight investigations. In other words, you have to be airborne within an hour, and a timing target once airborne would limit the possibility to do this in the air purely because of the cockpit workload. The route or routes must be long enough to provide a challenge to achieving the timing target. Similarly, the likely capability of the crew and aircraft combination would define the number of POIs required to be found. For example, a solo entrant in the slowest category would only have 1 POI per leg, whereas the crew of a dual entry would have 3. Average speed rules would provide a handicap of sorts, as this can be calculated from the post-flight data log, and basically rules out any advantage of flying either a very fast or a very slow aircraft. I plotted all my POIs and created a route where I could overfly them all in about a 4.5 hour flight. This was necessary in order to check that they were actually still there and hadn't been cut down, knocked down or blown up since I first saw them. In fact, several of them had indeed disappeared, which was mildly annoying. After all, what a great POI was the helicopter sitting in a back garden and apparently used as a hen house. That was until the end of last year when it disappeared. With the route sketched in, it would take a little under 5 hours to fly if I circled each POI once, taking a new photo, which was ideal. That was until I put the Minisport through a crash test. I survived as the crash test dummy, the aeroplane didn't. After the dust, not to mention the insurance claim had both settled, I needed another aeroplane. Luckily, I managed to find just the single-seater I wanted fairly quickly, so now we're back in the game. The new machine is a Brugger Colibri and flies faster than the Minisport, but has only 1/3 of the endurance, so my plan had to change to take this into account, and I split the route into 2 halves of approximately 2.5 hours each. I tested the cameras in their new positions and the results weren't very good. The engine created a lot more vibration than the previous one, and the larger canopy created a lot of reflections which I hadn't foreseen. Well, you don't, do you? See reflections in advance, that is, because they're always in retrospect, aren't they? Okay, moving on. The instruments are readable in mirror image, and even the reflection of my hands could be seen in shot. I made a cardboard glare shield to kill the first problem, and wore black gloves for the second, but the engine vibration was more difficult. I found that with the engine at idle then things were acceptable, but at normal cruising revs the trouble started and just got worse as the power was increased. Now, to get good oblique photos of the POIs, so they couldn't be identified easily from Google Earth, depends on flying past at about 500 feet, left wing down and lots of right rudder. This knife edge flight has to be held for long enough to get a good shot, and is much easier said than done and needs a lot of power to maintain. So we're back to the vibration thing again. In the end, I got the photos by running a small camera in video mode but with a high frame rate. This is what you normally do if shooting for later slow motion editing, but in this case I get the chance to grab a screenshot of the least blurry frame. The camera has a viewing screen, so I had a reasonable chance of getting the POI in the right place, but to be more certain I marked a line on the wing and flew so the feature passed under the leading edge at that point. Then count to 3, drop the wing, bang on the rudder, and the POI would slide gracefully past in the centre of the viewfinder. In theory. This sounds simple, but it took a lot of experimentation to find the right combination of sightline, height and power to get it right. I think that after all the hours spent flying with cross controls, the poor little Colibri has developed a permanent twist, which actually seems to make crosswind landings a bit easier, as long as the wind's from the left. The results were variable, but combined with those I got prior to the Minisport's demise, I had a library of over 300 images to choose from, and here's a screenshot of a typical presentation to a competing crew. Each POI has a number which must be entered in the appropriate place on the log. These POIs are defined by a bearing and range from the preceding waypoint, which must also be identified in a similar way. Some of them have the feature obscured, so a quick sketch or description is required, or an answer to a question that can't be derived from Google. I think the rest should be self-explanatory if you have access to the paperwork that will be given to the crew. This has been submitted separately. Of course, there's scope for cheating, otherwise known as applied lateral thinking. And given that will certainly happen, I've tried to make a virtue out of the necessity here. If the crew can demonstrate innovative skills in the management of navigation software, they'll get bonus points. Given that they'll have been given the outline of the route and task beforehand, this opens up lots of opportunities for, shall we say, initiative. I hope you've enjoyed the video. Thanks for watching.